We have a good group attending, although we did have quite a few who could not attend, and they send their regrets. We are sorry, but we are too busy and do not have the time to attend. Maybe next year. My name is Steve Finkelstein. I will be the moderator today. I'm a senior partner with Experience on Demand. Over the last 30 years, working with coaching business owners and leaders, we have found that effective time management is a critical skill for both business and personal success. But before we get started, let's have a warm-up and play a little time management game. Solve the puzzle. I know you got it. So the answer is Parkinson's law, which is the amount of work expands to fill the time available for completion means that if you give yourself a week to complete a 2-hour task, that task may increase in complexity and become more daunting as it fills throughout the week. And then you also wonder if it really will take more than 2 hours if you stretch it out for a 5-day period. And then you start hitting what we call procrastination. So what I would like for you to do is close your eyes and imagine that you had 8 more hours next week. When you came into work without any additional hours, you have 8 more hours a week to spend on the things that you want to spend them on. Those most important things like your employees and your customers and your vendors. Think about that. That's what today's all about. It's to give you some focus and tools to allow you to have more time to spend on those most important things that drive value for your company. So today we have 4 learning objectives. The first is to gain insights where you should invest your time and how they can have direct impact on your business. The second is to give you a better understanding of what are those time wasters that get in the way so you cannot focus on those most important things, and then a chance to assess your own time, where you're focusing to see how you can improve it, and then develop action plans. So we're going to have you take a look at what things could you start doing to improve your time management effectiveness. And in order to do that with the to-do list, you may need to have a stop doing. So we're going to have a chance to do that. Today, we're going to go through this agenda. First, we'll introduce our distinguished panelists. Then we'll talk about the business case for time management. Why is it important? We'll give you some research, which is really the surveys that you guys filled out prior to today. Some very interesting results, which is compatible to what the wider research looks like on the internet. Then we'll give you some best practices and tools based on what we see out there in the marketplace. Then we have some prepared questions that were submitted for our panel to answer. Then we're going to open it up for your questions, which you can provide through chat. And then we'll wrap it up with some top tips from our panelists, and then we'll have open and sharing at the end. And then don't forget, we're going to have a survey at the end. There's a link in the chat to allow you to give us feedback on today's webinar. So again, we have a 1-hour webinar today, panel discussion. Keep your video on, but your mute on as well. Submit any chat function will be used for submitting questions and any things you want to share on start and stop doing. As needed, adjust your speakers. And both midway and near the end, we're going to have a start and stop doing activity. So for example, you will leave today with 2 or 3 key things that as a business, and these may look familiar, that you look for your business that you want to start and stop doing for a business perspective, and maybe start and stop doing for a personal perspective. It's important that you leave here today with some actual to-dos. So let's get started. Let's introduce our distinguished panelists. Frank Danzo Frank is a senior partner with Experience on Demand. He has been in business and a career coach for 25 years, helping owners and executives become more effective leaders. An interesting fact about Frank is he has coached over 100 youth sports teams in our community. Great accomplishment. Next, I'd like to introduce Steve Albart. He's the Regional President, Enterprise Bank and Trust. He brings 22 years of experience with Enterprise Bank, managing loans and deposit portfolios of $1.5 billion. An interesting fact about Steve is he received the Champion of Kids Award for his 13 years of fundraising and board involvement at Kids in the Middle. Great contribution to the community. Next, we have Alan Epstein. He's a partner with Experience on Demand. He has a passion for helping grow businesses through effective marketing solutions. For those baseball fans, an interesting fact about Alan is he actually got a double in his only time at bat against Bob Gibson, one of the great St. Louis Cardinal pitchers, at a baseball fantasy camp. And we have Molly McKay. Molly is a vice president, senior business banker with Enterprise Bank and Trust. She's been in this role for 10 years and has been providing payment solutions to businesses for over 15 years. An interesting fact about Molly is she likes to eat sandwiches at her family-owned deli in St. Louis. So everyone is invited for lunch at Molly's house. Thanks, Molly. So now let's talk about the business case. If you look at the quote, the number one productivity killer that's been identified by business owners has been their time management. So let's take a look. If you could spend more time on your relationships with your customers, create raving fans, improving your net promoter score, additional repeat business from your customers, and retention of your customers, what would those mean to your top and bottom line? If you could spend more time, or if you could spend more time with your employees, you'd have lower turnover. What's the cost of that, or the benefit? You would be developing your people for future growth and succession planning, which also impacts retention. You would increase their productivity because you're coaching and training them. You're building a high performance culture. Everyone's heard the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And you'd have more effective communication, which typically is the number one issue inside companies to improve success. You'd also have, in terms of a business case, a work-life balance. You'd have more time for your personal and business relationships. You'd have time for professional development, like attending seminars like today. You'd have increased morale. You'd be more excited about your job. There'd also be increased attendance and less stress and sickness in the workplace. Another critical value in a business case for time management is your projects would be done more on time, more on budget, meeting deadlines, and actually achieving those realized benefits and realizing those benefits sooner versus later. And you would avoid overtime, paying people to work longer and harder to try to get back on schedule. In terms of quality, which impacts everything, you'd have more right first time, less rework, more better quality customer service, and less waste. All of those impact the top and bottom line. And then from a financial perspective, you'd pursue growth opportunities, you'd have a better control of your cash, you'd have lower costs, you wouldn't have to increase headcount for overtime and rework, and you would miss less opportunities for the future. So that's a very strong, compelling business case. For almost every item on here, you could assign dollars of time, cost, or actual improvement in financial results. So now let's take a look at your survey results. So this is really the results from your survey, which is consistent with what we found out in the marketplace. And a famous quote by Benjamin Franklin, lost time is never found. Here's a couple quotes we got from some of our clients. Why is it that I'm running out of time while my subordinates are running out of work? He actually came in one day after working a 14-hour day, and his employees were sitting around at the coffee area looking at their cell phones and chatting. Interesting situation. Or what about upward delegation? You ever heard this before? Hey boss, we've got a problem. Can I talk to you for a minute? So the survey population were 24 people, split between owners and leaders of organizations. In terms of average hours per week, you can see the average was 60. ranging from 20 to 80. You can also see in terms of hours a week per meeting, averaging 31. So that gets you 18 hours a week in meetings. And hopefully all those meetings were effective, of value, on time, and of quality. Now let's take a look at some of the feedback on some of these difficult questions. I spend more time on my business than in my business than on my business. I spend more time on company issues than company opportunities. I spend more time on my problem employees than mentoring and coaching my top performers. I work more hours, and it's really many more hours than my direct reports. I find that I'm constantly behind schedule versus being ahead of schedule or on schedule. And I spend more time managing versus leading. So are there any surprises? I mean, this is typically what we see, and that's why we're doing the webinar today, to give you an idea of how you can shift your time to the more positive side versus this side. A few more tough questions. I'm always saying yes and not saying no, or know how to say no. I find myself working on the urgent versus the important. That's the Stephen Covey 4 quadrants. I find we spend extra hours meeting deadlines, but we always seem to be behind. I spend more time fighting fires than fire prevention. I find myself procrastinating, especially in the larger, more difficult tasks. I spend more time on rework versus taking the time to do it right the first time, and I have a good work-life balance. So if you take a look at those questions as well, are there any surprises? And today, again, what we want you to do is think about things you can start and stop doing so you're making more productive use of your time. Family Feud. So like in Family Feud, 100 people were surveyed. The top 10 time wasters are on the board, and this is in priority order. Lower level customer issues, so that owners are spending more time on customer issues than employees can handle themselves. Decision making, there's a lack of a decision making process. Analysis paralysis, we never get done to try to make a decision. All this administrative work takes a lot of time. Employee problem solving, like that quote we said earlier, hey boss, we got a problem. They should be able to solve their own problems. Cell phone texting. Is there, excuse me.
Hello, where am I? I'm in a
Frank?
time management webinar.
Frank,
What do you mean we have a problem?
Frank, you should be practicing. Frank, you're a panelist.
You know, we've done this
Frank,
so many times. This would be the 17th time we've gone through this analysis again.
Frank, we're in a seminar.
Okay,
Frank,
okay. When do I need to have this done? Okay,
Frank,
I'll do it Saturday so we can
Frank,
review it on Monday. Okay, I got to go. I got to get back to my webinar. Goodbye.
Frank, you're a panelist, and you should be displaying the right principles. So we're going to reconsider. Multitasking, or lack of delegation, which is a hard thing to do, lack of planning, and lack of prioritization. Now let's take a look at where you should be spending your time. Again, this is what you told us. Let's spend our time on building and strengthening customer relationships, improving our decision-making process so it's more effective and timely. That we're focusing on the larger customer issues and problems and trying to prevent them. Let's take a look at strategic planning in the future, marketing and branding. Let's understand our competitive analysis, where our differentiation is and who our competition and where they're going. Let's build that strong high-performance culture. Let's have more effective correspondence. And also personal time for your personal life and work-life balance and personal growth and development, and also identifying and managing risk. Now, we talked about where you're spending your time in a not effective way and where you'd like to spend your time. These are ways of finding opportunities to reallocate your time. You can delegate administrative tasks. You can have more intentional work where you prioritize and develop metrics. You can have your direct reports with clear expectations, KPIs, so that they know what to do rather than sitting around waiting for you to tell them. You can stop relitigating decisions. Once you make a decision, move forward. And you can also get additional support. In this case, someone wanted some aftercare support for the child, but there's other kind of support that you can contract out. Or you can use better data for making better decisions rather than just winging it. You can outsource things, like some people outsource their tax, they outsource their IT support, some people outsource their accounting. You can block off time, like Monday mornings and Friday afternoons are your time that there's no interruption. Or you can learn how to say no more often. And last, you can delegate authority and responsibility. These are in no particular order, but these are the 10 ways of identifying more time. Now we're going to open this up to see if the audience has any questions, any comments. Put them in chat. Jake's going to read any of the questions, and we can assign them to one of the panelists. And then also take a minute to jot down a start or stop doing, both from a business perspective or a personal perspective. Jet, you see anything?
Nothing in the chat yet. I would also like to call out that you do have the option to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question. So you can also do that as well. Either way works.
All right, well, let's keep moving. There's an opportunity at the end to do it as well. So here's some of the best practices based on research. Again, time is a bank account without overdraft protection. You're free to spend it any way you like, but once it's spent, you can't go back and get it. So the research shows that 68% of the people, owners of companies and leaders, work in their business. Only 32% are really working on their business, but 73% would prefer to work on their business. 57% of the people, again, this is across thousands of people in the survey, work 6 days a week that are owners and leaders. 20% of that 57% work 7 days a week. The average work week, depending on the size of the company, could be 50 to 60 hours, but they prefer to work 41.7. The biggest time waster is 60% in meetings. 21.8 hours per week is wasted time of low value activities. And this is an interesting fact. 32% of the time was spent on emails, and in some cases texting as well, which is more time that's spent on interacting with employees and customers. And at the bottom right, you can see some of the organizations where some of these statistics came from. So here's a couple nuggets. If you have things to do, and in this case, you have rocks, which are the big things to do, gravel, which are intermediate things to do, and the little things to do is sand, and you try to fill up this jar, it kind of looks like it's full, but not really. In order to make sure you tackle your big rocks, or the big most important things, customers, employees, personal time, cash flow, strategic planning, those are the things you need to do first. So you need to focus on, when you plan your time out, your first rocks. Then you get to your gravel, which fills in the time that could be available once you get your big important things done. And then those little things, what you want to do, are important, that's done at the end. So remember the big rock leadership. When you start doing time management, first your big rocks, the most important things, then your intermediate, and then your small. Another key time management technique, and I encourage you to watch Vaden TED Talk. He talks about time multipliers. So is this the most important question you should ask yourself today? Or is it, what is the most important thing I can do today that would make me more time and more time tomorrow, make it better, that I can free up time? So he talks about, are there tasks I can eliminate? Are there tasks that I can automate? Are there tasks that I can delegate or teach someone to do? Can I outsource or contract out the task? And should I do it now or intentionally procrastinate and do it later? If you start spending your time on those kind of things that can free up more time in the future, you'll be better off. Now let's play a little game. Let's suppose you had, everyone now has, since we're working with the bank, the bank has deposited $86,400 in everyone's account. Right, Steve? It's all there. Now we all have that amount of money to spend today. You can't invest it or multiply it. You can only spend it today. And if you don't spend all $86,400, you're going to lose it. You can't bank it one day. So think about where you would spend it. Would you have trouble spending $86,400 in a day?
See, everybody here really just wants to save that money. Keep it in their
I
checking
know,
account.
but you have to spend it, Steve. So think about the intentional thought you have on this. Well, let's do the analogy. Remember the title of today? We're talking about spending time drives value and money to your organization. Each day, everybody has the same 86,400 seconds. And we choose how we spend our time to make a big difference. So the same thought and time you spend prioritizing where you would spend that $86,400 is the same discipline you should use on spending your time. It's a fun exercise. You can do that as your teams, but it's really important. So best practices to remove time wasters. We'll go through this quickly. Delegating authority, accountability, and responsibility. The salami technique, conquer and divide. Take the big task into slices. Use the 80-20 rule, the Pareto 80-20, the 20% of the things that make up 80% of your success, and focus. Do planning, set and track time. Just like you have a checkbook, you track where you spend your money. Avoid that upward delegation. Hey, boss, we got a problem. Block out time, and then a stop doing list. So now we're going to have some panelist questions. Time is money Jeopardy. Everyone's played Jeopardy before, but now we're actually going to have our distinguished panelists play Jeopardy. So Frank Danzo for 100. Frank, hiring contractors to alleviate the work I put into the business would allow me to work on the business, but I want to give proper time to hiring, which I know how important it is. It's the age-old problem. How to make time to get time later when it's now maxed out. Are there any tips or mindset shifts to help? Frank?
Thank you, Steve. Well, I think the first thing I would do is start with setting an objective of how many hours I really want to save. I think if we don't have objectives, it's hard to measure whether or not we've been successful. I would start by listing out all the tasks you would like someone else to do that you're thinking about hiring, either as a contractor or an employee. Don't combine tasks themselves. Make them as small and as independent as possible. Prioritize that list from the most important to the least. And then review each task and ask yourself, can I stop doing this? Will anybody really notice? If not, go through your organization and list at least one person or multiple people in your organization that could do that task besides you. Also ask yourself, can that task be automated so it takes less time or I don't have to do it at all? Once you go through those steps, one, delegate every task you can to someone else in the organization. Automate every task, even if you delegate it to someone else, because you're saving them time. And then look at the list to see what's over and look at how much time you've really saved. If this doesn't meet your objective, then the alternative, I think, is consider hiring a recruiter and let them do the work to find the right person for your organization.
Frank, I think that's the right answer. That's $100. Okay, Steve, for $100, what are the steps you can take to ensure you're filling your week with the most strategic appointments? How do I hold myself accountable? Is Steve there?
You have to unmute, Steve.
There we are. Sorry. That's a question that we talk about quite a bit at the bank on managing our appointments because it's about, everybody can fill their week up with appointments and they'll all seem important at the time. But what is in the example they gave, what are the big rock appointments that you need to have? And I think a couple of key areas that I know some colleagues really use what they call as a brain dump. Hey, on Friday, they lay out everything they need to do the following week and prioritize it, be very strategic. I know for myself, I keep a notepad next to my computer and track my appointments of the areas of the, COIs, clients, prospects, networking events, internal meetings, and really track my appointments over a week period of time so that maybe every week it's not perfect the way I want, but over the course of time, I know I can look at my appointment and track my appointments and say over a period of weeks or months, I did meet with the right number of people in each of those buckets. And that's how I manage my time, is making sure those weekly appointment buckets are filled with the highest value appointments. It's some weeks I lose control because things happen, but over time I feel good that I'm filling the bucket with the right appointments.
Thanks, Steve. I think you have the correct answer. Okay. Alan, it's up to you now. Alan, for $100, why do most businesses not have marketing as a high priority?
I actually wish I knew that answer.
You're supposed to.
Businesses seem to look at marketing as they meet and plan and they talk about the things that they need to do. But I've learned and just had some calls recently this week where the business owner tells me it's just not the priority. And they know it needs to be because of the effectiveness of what it can do to the top line in terms of generating revenue. What I would say is put it on the front burner, take it off the back burner, and focus on increasing revenue. It's not hard. Just as Nike would say, just do it.
Great. Alan, I think that's the correct answer. Okay, Molly, for $100, are there differences in dealing with time management for the generation? Different techniques or behaviors?
So I took this in two different ways because Stephen Covey talks about the generations for time management, and I would urge everyone to Google that because there's a pretty cool essay online. But I also took this question from a generational standpoint, and I seem to meet with more and more younger entrepreneurs that start the business model with the mentality of what they do not want to do in their day-to-day operations, and they build their business upon that. So I find that pretty interesting that that they would start with that from a delegation standpoint. And I think it's harder for seasoned executives to evaluate habits simply because they've done every role that there is possible within the organization. And I think that if key executives just took the time to really evaluate what their strengths are, it would be a good way to free up time and help elevate the growth of the business.
Thanks, Molly. I think that is correct answer. So we now have, everyone has $100. Frank, for $200, what type of time management tools should I use? What are a few best options? Frank.
Sorry about that. Steve, there's new time management tools being created every day, but most of them are not going to be for everyone. The primary criteria I use in time management is tools that you're comfortable with using and that you go back to normally and from your own habits. I find when I jump on new tools just randomly, they last for a few days, maybe a week, and then I forget about them. Yeah, we got to be open to new tools, such as video meetings that we've learned to use appropriately. But really, you want to pick tools that meet your style, your habits, and your comfort level. For me, I use a combination of to-do list on my phone where I have specific categories that I put reminders in and objectives deadlines. And then I use my calendar extensively, obviously for appointments, but also for reminders and deadlines, so that I always have it visually in front of me going forward.
Great, thank you. All right, I think that's a correct answer. So Steve, up to you. Steve, for 200. How do I start developing a dashboard to run my business? What are measurable activities that drive my business success?
I've talked to business owners. I've been working, advising, partnering with business owners for nearly 25 years. And, this is an area we spend a lot of time with talking about a dashboard that not only is a time management tool, but what are the 3, 4, 5 metrics that are going to drive your business or drive your performance, and really get that identified for a quick, easy way. So I think it goes back to the first question of what are the most important things I should be working on. And I think a dashboard helps business owners, whether that's profitability, sales, whatever it is that can drive your business the most, get it on a dashboard that you can see every week. And I think that ties back into the time blocking, or gets back into just developing a plan for the week. When you go into the week, whether it be what I talked about, the brain dump, or whether it be just, hey, tracking appointments, what is the plan that you want to go into the week, with? And that dashboard to me is part of that plan.
So it sounds like making things visible is important.
Absolutely. I think what you see and what you measure will improve.
All right, I think you got the right answer. All right, Molly. Molly for 200.
Yeah, it is a good question for me because I have a lot of little tasks that I have to do throughout the day. But some quick tips. I think time blocking is amazing, and also just remembering your main focus. And I was actually also thinking about just getting a whiteboard that shows the rocks to say these are the main focus of what I need to do throughout the day, just because the little tasks can add up so much. But I really like what Steve mentioned earlier about reviewing your day or your week, just so that you make sure that you're checking those boxes. But for me, the unread flag in my email helps me prioritize my tasks so much. So if you're not using that, and it's probably an old technique, but I would definitely do that. But I think also confirming ownership when you do delegate a task so that it's off your plate it's really helpful for me in learning to say no.
Thank you. Well, I think it's a tie. So now we're going to open it up. Are there any audience questions, or anyone like to share something that a tidbit from today that they would start or stop doing? Got to have one. Is there a question or a start or stop doing? Any good nuggets from today anyone's learned?
Yeah, this is Gary. I kind of share a lot of the same feelings with folks, the time blocking, and I saw a comment come up here about the client emergencies that pop up in a business development role. It seems like we're always being pulled, I work with Motley, we're always being pulled towards trying to satisfy the customer. So trying to strike that right balance, knowing that sometimes what's really important to them, and it's 100% wouldn't be calling, but at the same time, being able to manage your time effectively so that you're not constantly being jerked left and right and lose sight of what you're trying to do. So, something I continue to work on. Hopefully it will be better this year. But again, focus priority-wise is getting deals over the finish line. So that always takes priority during the day for me, and towards the end of the month as we reset the clock for the beginning of the next month. So those are some of my comments about that.
Yeah,
Thanks, Gary.
Go ahead. I just wanted to say that there's a few comments in the chat that I wanted, and there is a question on here that I wanted to just highlight, is that, there's some, Rebecca said, really appreciated the point, what you see and measure will improve. And I know Rebecca also put on here about things to start doing. Figure out my key measures and find ways to keep them front and center. So a couple of comments in chat. And one of the questions here from Preston, what are the 3 best tools currently on your phone that you use to help manage your time? And maybe that'd be something I'll defer to the rest of the panel to answer.
Why don't we save those questions to the very end? But that's a great one. Okay. So again, here's a key quote: management is doing things right where leadership is doing the right things. So each of you, again, should have your own start and stop doing list. Hopefully you have some good nuggets to take away. I think we heard a couple in the open session. But now it's time for Final Jeopardy. So Final Jeopardy, let me read the quote. Efficiency is doing things right, and effectiveness is doing the right things right, because there's no right way to do the wrong thing. Don't ask me to repeat that, but that's a very important thing to remember. So let's get the one nugget, the one best practice from each of our panelists of all the things that they know and all their experience. So now we're going to do Final Jeopardy. So each panelist is going to write down their answer. What is your number one nugget, your takeaway for owners and leaders to enhance their time management? Please write it down. Okay. Frank, what's your answer?
My answer for that would be take 2 weeks each at some point in time, a detailed calendar, so you've got every activity you've had written down for a maximum 30-minute blocks. Then over 2 weeks, summarize where you're spending your time. Knowing where you're spending your time now is critical if you need to change your habits of where you want to spend your time. Do this a couple times a year at checkpoints. Also, block off some specific time on your calendar to work on the key initiatives. Don't work on them when you can. Specifically set appointments on your calendar to work on them when you want to. Consider doing some of this more thinking work outside your office, outside your facility. Get someplace where you're not going to be interrupted or someone wants to come in and talk about how's your weekend. And when a task needs to be completed, always ask yourself, who else besides me can do this better? Who else can do this and learn from this? And where am I going to get the highest return of where I spend my time, which might not be on specific tasks?
Great. Well, I think I'm looking at the judges. That is the right answer. So, Steve, it's up to you.
Yeah, I think my nugget here is really related to do only what you can do. What is it that can move the needle the most? Focus on the big rocks. Kind of ties into what Frank said. Tracking appointments. That's a tangible item you can start doing. I have my notepad next to my computer. I write down every appointment and make sure I'm filling the right buckets. So, in making sure that I'm only involved in appointments that I need to be involved with. Easier said than done. It's a constant battle for me, but I know it's what I need to do, and it's a best practice.
All right, the judges say that is a correct answer. So, Alan, it's up to you.
Executives have a hard time delegating. That was covered in this webinar earlier. And something I learned many years ago when I had a very difficult time delegating is that the less you touch, the more effective you are. If you think about that, it's you have to let go and you will be a more effective executive. Actually came from the E-Myth, which is a very old book. And I found that to be a very helpful resource in teaching myself how to better delegate.
All right, looking at the judges, that is a correct answer. So, Molly, it's up to you.
As much as I know it takes so much time from a business owner's perspective to evaluate vendors, But I think I've seen enough and heard enough from business owners that say, why didn't I just look at this early? And I think that earlier, because it did save them time. And so obviously you can't review every vendor all the time, but I think being open to their ideas about time management techniques really can save you a lot of time if it's the appropriate vendor.
All right, I think the judges that is the correct answer. So everyone's doing well. Now what we want to do is open up the forum for questions. Let's get back to the one question about any tips or techniques of using your cell phone on time management. My suggestion is turn it off. If you look at the statistics, cell phones, people spend more time on their cell phone than they do with their spouses, with their friends. It breaks up marriages. You need to, the cell phone, there's a movie out where the cell phone is controlling this person and they started to fall in love because they spend so much time with their cell phone. You need to not let the cell phone control you. But I'm only a moderator, so what do I know? Do we have a panelist that can give us an expert opinion?
Well, Steve, I've got one thought for people. On my iPhone, I use Siri extensively. Rather than trying to write things down, I'll just ask Siri to make an appointment on my calendar to remind something, or set an appointment, or add a specific item to my to-do list.
Wow.
So that all I have to do is say it, is go into the phone and type it in, and it really saves me a great deal of time.
Does Siri ever talk back to you?
Too often.
Okay, any other tips? Anyone in the audience or any of our distinguished panelists?
Rebecca wrote that she uses Asana or ASANA. I'm not really familiar with what that is, so I don't know if any of the panelists or if Rebecca would want to unmute. I'd like to hear more of what Asana is that uses on a phone to help manage time. Well,
Never heard of it.
Were there any other questions in the chat? Anyone like to share a start or stop doing? There's something from Beth. Can you read that?
yeah, I can. Do you have any decision-making processes, methodologies you use to make quicker decisions that align with what's important in your business?
Who would like to take that? I'll take it. So I'm just a moderator. So one of the things we do in decision making is the first thing is to establish decision criteria. And that's not 100 things. It's the 3 or 4 key things to make the decision. And then you look at the pros and cons for each of the alternatives. So it's important to develop alternatives, the pros and cons. And one of the alternatives is the cost of doing nothing. So when you look at the decision-making process of buying a new computer or buying a new car or hiring a new employee, one alternative is the cost of doing nothing. And then you just evaluate those, get consensus, and move on. If you send Molly your email address, I will send you a PowerPoint deck that walks you through what I just said in formality with all the tools and templates. So I'd be happy to share that with you. So just send Molly McKay the request for decision-making process, and I will make sure you get that.
Steve, I got a suggestion also, if I could step in. I always like to identify whose decision this is. Sometimes we're not sure who's making the final decision, so identifying that person up front is very important, and then asking that person what information they need to help them make that decision.
Great. And we do have a question from Preston Cameron. Preston, you want us to read it, or you want to go off mute?
Thanks, Steve. The question is, there's a lot of time spent worrying about the impact of a decision or the result, impending result of a decision, something that I'm doing. What's one tip that the panelists have uncovered that might help eliminate that tendency to worry about the outcome of the decision? So I spend a lot of time wasting time worrying about decisions. A tip?
Great point. Well, we have 4 expert panelists, and I'm sure at least one of those can give you an answer.
I think, Preston, I think you should make sure that you're writing out the criteria that you're making your decision on. Sometimes if we keep all these thoughts in our head, then we second guess ourselves every second that goes by after we make the decision. But if you have specific criteria, what you're trying to achieve with clear goals, I think that takes some of the unknown out of it, because you know what to look for as the outcome versus thinking about what outcome might come my way.
Great. Any other comments on that?
I was also thinking too that value of having that advisory group around you, whether that be in the form of other business owners or in the form of maybe your CPAs and attorneys and accountants, but they can also, chances are they probably have a story or something regarding that same type of question. So I think it's to make sure that you're around the right people and asking others.
Great point. Are there any other questions in the chat? Any other comments?
Yeah, there's Rebecca Hoyt did respond that Asana is a project management tool.
Oh, good.
For to-do lists, calendars, etc. And if you go to the chat, Rebecca was kind enough to include a website on getting more information.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate that. Anything that people like to share and start or stop doing? Any comments regarding Parkinson's law? So let me ask the question. If you had a task to write a proposal on Monday, and you figure that task is going to take you three hours, but you say, I'm going to wait till Friday to get it done, would the same quality proposal be done if you just did it on Monday? If you had the 3 hours, would it be more complex if you did it over the week? Would you procrastinate to Thursday night? Any insights on how you would behave, the behavior with Parkinson's law? Because it is true, the longer you wait to get something done, the more people tend to procrastinate.
Well, I've been thinking, Steve is smiling. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and I find that not only is it that maybe the quality of work could be lacking, but also that the mind space that took up that took up because of that project, and maybe if you had just gotten the project done, your mind space would be free to do other projects.
Right. So Beth, did you have a comment or something in chat? I just saw it flash.
Yeah, it's pretty much what Molly said. The longer I wait, the more I stress about it. So just getting it done, getting it off the plate is helpful.
All right, we have a few more minutes. If anyone has any other questions or comments.
I think, Steve, on that issue, I think a great visual is your rock and sand example. Visuals tend to stick in the mind better than words. And when you're faced with tasks, just think of those rocks and sand in the bottle, and tackle the bigger jobs, the more important jobs first.
Yeah, and for those of the people who know me, one of my favorite tips in business is the Pareto 80-20 rule. So if I have 15 things that need to be done, I ask the question, what's the 2 or 3 or 4, the 20% that make up 80% of my success for the week? And those are the big rocks I better start focusing on. And if one of those rocks is too big to do today, I split it using the salami technique into 2 pieces and then tackle them that way. But you got to focus on those big rocks. Now, I'm not suggesting you have mayonnaise jars and rocks in your office, but a visual. Go out and watch the TED Talk. Just rocks in the jar, and you'll see some great ideas. Any other comments or questions? We want to make sure in your chat, there's a link to a survey to give us feedback on a couple things. One would be the quality of today, anything we didn't cover that you'd like to see covered in the future. But we want to make sure we have time for any additional questions. And if anything comes up afterwards, you can contact Molly McKay at the bank. And if there's anything else, questions you have, we'll be happy to call you or respond via email. Anything else in the chat?
Steve, I think I'm happy.
Okay.
Hi, guys. So something I've been doing at my office that we've been really trying to focus on, I'm an insurance agent, so our sales district leaders kind of came up with these small groups, and the one we're working with is very progressive. So we have this new mindset of the first 15 minutes of each hour, we do hyper diligent work on whatever our tasks are. So if we know we're going to be quoting, or we know we're going to be following up on claims, we put all of our emphasis in those first 15 minutes to get as much of it done as possible. So the last 45 minutes, we can do other things, start preparing our lists, or go into the next task. The whole mindset behind it is the fact that we as individuals in our generation don't have a very large attention span. I'm not trying to be, ageism or anything of that nature, but we have this focus that it's like you can yell squirrel and we're in a different place. So it's a way that we can start focusing really hard until our mind starts drifting and then take a break. And we found that we're getting more quality work in 3 hours of working in an 8-hour day than we would get in an 8-hour day doing things all throughout.
Well, that's a great tip, because attention span is great, especially with the younger generation. With the older generation, it's memory, right? So you want to do it while you remember what you're working on. But different people, different times of the day, like some people have more energy in the morning than the afternoon. So you want to put all that energy where you can when it's the most productive. That's a great tip, John. Thank you. Molly, did you have a comment?
Yeah, how'd you know? Yes. Well,
I'm a mind reader. Go ahead.
You must have, or maybe I was typing in the chat. But I'm also with people that I tend to have a lot of meetings with, or I know pretty well. I've started to try to set my calendar for a half hour or 45 minutes versus an hour. And so then you can fill your day a little bit more appropriately. Most things can be accomplished in a little bit shorter time.
Okay. Frank, you have a comment?
Yes, Steve. One of my clients last year implemented no meetings on Friday. And so they've strictly enforced that no internal meetings at all on Friday. So if it's not a client customer, you have the day to work on what's important to you to get done versus having constant interruptions from your coworkers. And it's worked out really good for them.
Yeah, so one of the things on meeting management, next week is actually National Meeting Management Week. So it's against the law to have a meeting all next week. Imagine what you would do with your time. Remember, we said about 18 hours a week is spent in meetings. A lot of organizations, when you start looking at the effectiveness of meetings, you're not really getting the bang for the buck for the time you put in. So I would suggest everyone try to strive for reducing time in meetings, and you'll see what you can do to be more productive, more effective meetings, and then you can reallocate and invest that time somewhere else. John, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I had a question. I was to Frank, what industry is that person involved in that he has the no meetings on Fridays? Because I do meetings on Mondays and Fridays with my staff just to kind of, here's what we're doing for the week. How did it all work out? Let's prep for Monday.
It's a banking operation.
Thanks.
All right, did we have, looks like somebody, Corey, somebody have something else in chat?
Well, Steve, I just want to say that in the chat is now the link for the survey that we would like everybody to please fill out.
All right, so first of all, to wrap this up, we'd like to thank everybody for your time, which is valuable, your input and ideas, and thank you so much for being part of this session today. Based on your feedback, we hope to have more of these. So this is in the link. There's a Survey Monkey. It'll take you 2 minutes to fill it out. But I want you to look at the quote on this page. The bad news is time flies. The good news is you're the pilot. So you have the choice of which direction you're going. You have the choice whether you're going to crash into a wall or crash into a mountain or what direction you're going into. So we thank everybody for your time today, your comments, your input. We look forward to future sessions like this. Please fill out the survey, and thank you very much. Here's a list of contact for the panelists. Again, if there's anything you're looking for, the person who wanted information on decision making, please send that to Molly, and I will make sure you get that PowerPoint presentation. Thanks, everybody. And guess what? We're done a few minutes early. One of the best time management techniques in meetings is always get done 5 minutes early so you're not late to the next meeting. So thank you again. Appreciate it and look forward to have a great day.